everybody. So while we're waiting for our speaker, my name is Olga Muller. I run the local custom health tech software engineering firm called Kepler Team. And today we're going to finish today's sessions with the fun subject of how to innovate the right way, how regulations are relevant, which we understand that we are all working in the industry where really regulations do define how many products are being launched, how they're used, and whether they actually make it to the market. So I guess we're still waiting for one. Okay, perfect. Welcome, Elissa. I'm going to let our panelists introduce themselves and talk about what part they play in that ecosystem. I know we're actually missing one due to hurricane, which I'm sure many other panels do too. And please go ahead.
Awesome. So I'm Elizabeth Outten. I'm the Senior Director of External Affairs for Novant Health. And my primary role is as our company's lead state lobbyist. So I build relationships with elected officials at the state level primarily, but also do some work in Congress and with local government. Our team is also responsible for regulatory policy, primarily at the federal level. And so the things that I will hopefully share with you today will give some familiarity to those processes and help you see why your voices are so important in that process. It really is critical, especially as innovators in the healthcare field.
Elissa?
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Elissa Prichep. I'm a Senior Director of Marketing in the Experience Transformation Group at Tata Consultancy Services. I was previously at the World Economic Forum on the platform for shaping the future of health and healthcare, where I worked with multi-stakeholder groups, including policymakers, to shape agendas and look at forward implications of advances in healthcare. And before that, I was in the pharmaceutical industry. Prior to that, I actually worked at the state government level. So I will try to supplement with perspectives from that kind of multi-stakeholder cross-platform lens.
Awesome. So I'll start with posing a question of what is the right way to innovate, really? What needs to be in place for the innovation to be supported?
So, I think my lens is definitely one of how do you educate elected officials and regulators on the product or service or perspective that you're bringing to a market. And often, as the panel before us said, there's not an example out there for them to look at. Legislators and regulators look to see what has happened already. They like to see where things have worked previously. They look to other states, sometimes other countries, although that's getting more and more rare, to see how things are going, and they mirror their policies from those existing experiences. So when you're bringing something to them that they've never experienced before, educating them is critical. And doing that in a way that starts from where they are, and that starts with a relationship. So often our approach in talking about many of the things that we try to innovate, the new experiences that we're having, things like a once-in-a-lifetime pandemic, trying to educate elected officials on what that did to our system and how we had to make quick changes that we hadn't had to make before, is something that we really had to be quick on our feet about. That involves having relationships up front. So having lunch or coffee or things that seem really intuitive with an elected official are absolutely appropriate. Things like having those same kind of meetings with staff. Staff is critically important. They often are the decision makers in those offices. So those kinds of relationship building things that you can do on the front end before you're even talking about anything that you would bring to them is critical. Then, once you are talking about what you're bringing to market, what your ideas are, saying it in a way they understand it, you have to think about who exactly you're talking to. These are often, I'll speak in the case of North Carolina, farmers and Some are pharmacists. We've had physicians. We have some who are policemen. They come from across all these different industries. So when we start using things like acronyms or really technical language, their ears turn off. So coming to them with why this is going to benefit them, their family, and their constituents is really important, because their constituents especially are the people who hire and fire them. They are the equivalent of their investors. So they have to explain the decisions that they make in terms that their hirer and firer folks can understand. So I'll stop there, but the key, I think, is talking to folks in a way that they can, you meet them where they are and don't expect them to come to where you are.
I'll build on that, maybe more from a bit of a marketing perspective. I would say the way to innovate is how most people are already doing it. Identify the pain points. I always say be the customer. In this case, your customer is more that government official, but understand as much as you can what it's like to be in their shoes, to go through their process related to the issue you're talking to them about. And with that, really kind of, I would say, map out the journey, understand where things are difficult, what other parties are becoming engaged across the process, and how to also incorporate conversations with those parties. So I was working on a health initiative in another country, and of course we were focused on the Ministry of Health, but the ethics committee leads got involved, the finance committee leads got involved, legal got involved. So, understand who else comes into that journey for your customer and how to include them in the conversation. And the last thing I would add on that is also, really focus. You don't want to go to everybody, but focus on the people who are the decision makers and also have the most influence and expertise around those decision makers. So as was said, not just the elected official, but the staff is really, really critical. So, maybe as you're thinking about your customers for your product or your service, kind of use some of the same thinking and apply that to your government stakeholders.
Makes sense. Can you think of some specific examples of what your journey took to actually get to innovate with the government?
Do you want to start with that one?
Sure. I can go into the last story a little bit more. This isn't the U.S. government, but it's one of the most recent I was working on. This is with a foreign government, and I'd say a couple things really drove how we were innovating. There was interest from their side first, but step one is really understanding the incentives and the context. So for this government, they wanted to become more of a regional healthcare hub. And with that meant, not only developing their own reputation globally, but providing a place for their citizens to have access to care instead of leaving the region to get care elsewhere, and potentially even attracting people from outside that immediate region to get care within country. So there's an altruistic element, but there's also a financial incentive. There's an economic impact that's happening in terms of kind of an example that I'm giving. So step one was understand the incentives, the context. Step two, really working again across the different officials within government to really identify what type of project, what type of pilot would help achieve what they were looking to achieve, and thinking about how we could kick that off. So in this case, we were looking to understand the role of genetic testing and breast cancer, and with that, understand drivers of cancer within the country, how we could build out more of a cancer care ecosystem. So we got to that point. I would say then step three, it's really a multi-stakeholder collaboration. So, you have your government officials certainly, but it was also very important to work with patient stakeholders, patient advocacy groups, other business entities, academics who are well respected and knowledgeable in the field, and really kind of grow that multi-stakeholder coalition, because at that point you're really moving forward an initiative with all the right players, people who can really have an impact, and it's in a pre-competitive space. So it helps you, again, build relationships, drive impact, and get something done on the ground that can then be assessed and developed further. So that's one example of moving things forward. Pass it back.
Yeah, I think we have a similar experience. I think for almost anything that we try to move forward, we look for aligned stakeholders. So who are the others that would benefit from whatever it is we're trying to move forward? Who are those who have contributed to making that a success? I know at Novant Health, during the pandemic, one of the things that we launched was a drone with the company Zipline, who was able to help us deliver medication from one hospital to another. That was really something that we thought was the beginning of something very valuable. And what could come from that, we were really excited about. But we ran into a bunch of barriers in the regulatory space, especially because people hadn't really been doing that before. And when you start, I learned, getting into aviation law and aviation regulations, it turns out they're pretty strict. And so we had to do a lot of navigating to understand how do we as a hospital articulate why this use case for a drone is something important to an elected official or to a regulator. And I think that one of the things we were able to successfully do is show not just the benefit to Novant Health and to Zipline, but to other industries that could potentially be using some of the same technology and same kind of process, and that it showed a gap in what aviation regulation had currently, and we were able to kind of help form what maybe should come next in bringing in other stakeholders who said, yeah, we thought about doing this, but realized we couldn't. It was way too hard to navigate you government people, so we moved in a different direction. And so that was our experience, was bringing those, like she said, bringing voices to the table. And I'll say, the other little trick to that is the voices you bring to the table are those that mean the most to the person you're talking to. So if your elected official is a banker by trade, having a banker come talk to them about the value of this is really useful. Think about the people that you listen to in your life. They're the people who have the most similar experience. They're your family members. They're your neighbors. So when you have that kind of either profession or physical geography proximity, you really do get farther in opening an elected official's ears. So that was where we found success in that particular example.
Awesome. Speaking about barriers, when we talk about highly regulated industry, obviously there are always some obstacles on the regulatory side to any innovation. What would you say the founders and innovators, what kind of due diligence are they really supposed to do prior to bringing their innovation to market or promoting it across, whether it's government or even a commercial space?
So I'll answer as a non-attorney, and although I'm sure if anyone from my legal team were up here, they'd have a very long list of things that you should do before bringing anything to market or considering, the long list of regulations to follow. I think that what we ask from our government relations lens is that they go through legal and then come to us and tell us where they're having issues. So where is there ambiguity? Where is there a gap because regulation or statute hasn't caught up to whatever we're considering? Where is there a potential hurdle where we think it might be one thing, but maybe might not be? And identify those barriers for us so that we can then go try to change them as things are coming on board. So, I think it's important to realize that statute and regulation, while daunting, absolutely, the process is cumbersome at best, is changeable and nothing is permanent, and that we all have a role to play, especially you in the innovation space, in making sure that what's out there encourages that as best it can rather than stifles it.
Elissa, do you have something to add?
Sure. I think just to take maybe a different angle into this, I would definitely say just do some basic research to start. I just saw the FDA has a digital health center of excellence available online with regulations, with presentations. I mean, just get your bearings and do some due diligence on some of the issues that will come up when it. If any of you are working with data, and I'm sure you are, that's where a lot of barriers or questions may bubble to the surface. And understanding what some of those issues are is going to be absolutely critical because there are various federal regulations as well as state regulations that overlap and leave gaps in different ways. If there are attorneys available to talk with to get some guidance, certainly do that in those areas. But also, I would say, for those who are really innovative and really playing at the cusp of where healthcare is going, sometimes there's a lack of regulations, policies to address the question that you're bringing up. And with that, again, working very closely with your government partners, building those relationships, helping them understand what's coming up in the healthcare world that needs additional oversight is one way to move forward. Sometimes you'll be the ones bringing the issues to your government officials. The other thing I would suggest is also look around at what kind of governance models are in place. Sometimes industry associations form, sometimes partnerships form, and governance frameworks are set out to address areas that may not really have policy up against them yet. So again, particularly with data, when you're talking about data privacy, data sharing, data collection, data consents, do look at what else is in the environment from a governance perspective to help fill some gaps.
Can I add to that? So the other thing I would say that I very much builds on that, I think, is the elected officials especially, and agency officials as well, but I come from working in a U.S. Senate office, and so prior to my time with Novant Health, and so I know a function of our office was to help constituents. And an enormous function of our office was helping business constituents, especially those that were bringing new ideas and innovation and market drivers to parts of North Carolina. And so, I think that there's an enormous resource available to you in elected official offices, especially at the federal level, where there's someone specialized in those offices prepared to help you navigate what can be a very complicated process or system or regulatory environment. And so, they are thrilled to be able to say that they've enabled a business and helped to start something up in a particular region. And so I highly recommend, if you run into barriers or you just don't know where to start, reaching out to your U.S. Senate office and describing what you're considering and asking for their help in navigating.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing is really we should be looking at those governing bodies as resources, as something that supports innovation rather than hinders it, right? And how do we help those officials kind of catch up faster with that innovative mindset that, it's a known gap sometimes? What do you feel we can do as innovators?
I think that one of the best things we can do is show, I'll say elected officials, but true for agency staff and elected official staff as well, is show them. So if there's something visual that you can either bring in their office or take them on a tour of in district, they're often in the state back home. And so they love that. Think about, this is, don't tell them I said this, but it's like showing children Disney World. They like to be in the room, seeing things. It gives them something to visualize as they're writing these very complicated statutes, and it gives them a way to better describe, as someone up here, it's a T-shirt that delivers medicine, picture so it's very helpful to bring whoever you can to see whatever you're willing to show them. And as we advise all of our health system partners, don't just show them what's working, show them what's broken. So if you've tried something and it didn't work, and there's potentially something, a regulatory barrier or other, market issue that you can point to, I couldn't get this supply in the country. I couldn't, move this across rail lines because there was almost a strike. Pick your thing. Being able to articulate those things and show them, this is what it would have been, but this is what prevented it, is really helpful too. If you show them things that work all the time, they don't see their role in helping, and they inherently, I'll say this, we'll be optimistic, they inherently want to help. So I think that it's important not just to show how great something you've invented is, that is important as well, but to show where there are gaps and breaks in the process.
Yeah, I like to say that all of us are patients. All of us are in the healthcare system. We have family members who are in the healthcare system. And I feel like a lot of times that can be forgotten, and we start to talk to people about health and health innovations in a very abstract way. So bringing the conversation to a very human level is something that's so important. And I absolutely agree with show them and bring the so what. Oftentimes that's missing too. It's, here's the problem that we're facing, and, pause, expect the government official or whomever to have the solution. What's it mean to solve that problem or your solution? What does your solution really mean from a health perspective, from a fiscal perspective, from a advancement perspective? Is it driving the sphere of healthcare treatment or diagnostics or care forward in a way? And why is that so important? What's the vision that emanates from that? So, go a couple steps beyond as you're telling your story. Don't just stop at, here's the problem and I have a product. So what does that mean when you put it together in terms of delivering for a constituency?
And if you can bring someone from that constituency into the conversation to tell that story, the more human you can make it, the better. Mm-hmm. So being able to attach innovation to the people that it benefits or the problem that it's fixing directly is really, that's where the sweet spot is, where you see lots of mobilization really fast when elected officials can really see the people that are going to be helped.
Yeah, I love that point of we all kind of patients, right? I think I'd like to open it for questions from the audience. I have some interesting questions. Let's see.
Hi, my name is Igor Gorlatov. I'm working with Olga Muller at Kepler. And I'm talking to a lot of your colleagues at Novant Health, like Nita here, Carl Hightower. And I'm trying to learn how organizations like Novant Health and Atrium and other big systems, how you guys are learning to innovate. How are you learning to empower small teams to go out and do stuff? How do you give them budgets? Have you had any positive experience in that space? And if so, could you share how to make it work? Thank you.
So we have some colleagues that could probably answer your question really quickly. I'll say from my government relations lens, where it comes to me is once it's sort of pretty baked and we're telling people about it. So, I think that we, and Nita could probably speak to this too, but I think that someone said earlier, you keep your innovators a little bit separate from the core of the company. We have definitely done that a little bit more. So I've been with Novant Health for 8.5 years, and in my time here, that has been something that I've seen happen a lot more, and they're given a little bit more free rein to figure out what works, what doesn't, and licensed to be creative. And that's not that I'm not given that license, but it's a little bit more structured in what I do versus in these bodies that are a little bit separate. In Carl's space, and he can absolutely speak to this, better than most. I think that he especially, I know, puts a particular focus on being exposed to what's out there. So he is an avid reader. He seeks information. He's constantly looking for what's next. And this is where I love to interact with Carl. He tells me what's preventing those things from happening. And so we talk a lot about, he actually caught me eating tacos earlier, and he told me that we have a problem in the privacy space, and here's what we need to do about it. And we, how much data is someone willing to give their physician if we could have caught their cancer 5 years earlier? And so his thinking, I think that one of the things we focus on, you asked the question earlier about hiring a team, is finding those on our team who think that way. And so, not just settling for what is, but what could be. And I know that Carl especially thinks that way. Does that answer your question? Okay.
So I actually have a question. How do you view that relationship between innovation and regulations?
Yeah, that's interesting. I think if you were talking to some of the teams that innovate, and I know talking to many of you, especially in the Senate job that I had previously, I spoke to entrepreneurs all the time and people in the innovation and economic development space a lot. And what I heard was, government. And, sitting in a government office, I was like, oh, sorry. But tell me what your issues are, because we truly want to fix them. So, I think that one of the best things we can do now that I'm outside of that government space is articulate where our challenges are and do it in a way that the elected officials can understand, and not assume. I will not say that government is incredible. I would never, ever tell you that there aren't issues. and some of the things you read in the newspaper are absolutely true. But I will say that I know, at least for some of the elected officials I have worked for, they feel very strongly to their core about helping people, especially in the innovation and business and entrepreneurial space, and want to enable that as best they can. And they get as frustrated as we all do when they can't. And so I think continuing to bring issues to them in a constructive, we're on the same team kind of way, rather than seeing them as a foe, is really helpful. And understanding they absolutely are a foe in some scenarios. I think that not assuming that initially is really helpful.
What's your take, Elissa?
Yeah, sure. In terms of the innovation thinkers and people who interface more directly, one of the things I've seen that's really effective is the internal innovation thinkers are often looking several years out, and thinking about what products are coming, what's in the pipeline, what's medical care going to look like 10 plus years. And to get to that, there's usually some agenda shaping that needs to be done. So what needs to be on the radar, what needs to be kind of accepted in the landscape, because that takes a long time to develop. So, for example, I worked on an oncology initiative where research has shown that people who receive CT scans obviously have much better outcomes. Their lung cancer can be caught earlier. And if this kind of preventative care is made available across the board instead of just to people who have a history of smoking and are over a certain age, that many more lives would be saved. Well, that's kind of a long-term conversation, because you're then adjusting payment structures, you're adjusting reimbursements, you're adjusting medical guidelines. So how then can the people on the innovation side who see this future of much more preventative care focused activity work with people in government and work with as well standard setters and physician organizations to start to kind of build to a place where there can be funding, there can be planning for CT scans available to everybody. So I think that's one thing is take the innovation folks and their vision and think about how to build an agenda around that is a long-term development process instead of I have this product now or this service now and I need to get over this hurdle and I want it done in a year. So that's one thought. I also wanted to build a little bit on what was discussed before. Again, I think everybody has priorities, and again, people within government, there are certain strategic priorities they're pursuing. Or if we just think back to the case of COVID, in the health world, there was a lot that fell by the wayside as COVID became the number one priority. And thinking about how the initiative you're trying to pursue fits in with the priorities of government gives it much more likelihood to see the light of day, to land on somebody's desk, to get that call back and have a discussion. If you're pushing kind of your own agenda that doesn't really fit in with what anybody else is trying to achieve or any other priorities or anything else that's been funded, you're going to have a much, much more difficult time seeing results and moving your issue forward. So, always, again, keep in mind the context of the world that people are operating in and be respectful of that and find the commonalities that you can move forward together.
Thank you. So do we have any more questions? I think with that, we're going to conclude it. Don't want to stand between people and the activities for the night. So thank you very much.
Thank you.